So here we see again, it's another king. Well, we've heard a bit about him already, Josiah, this king, but the title of this chapter kind of gives the game away a little bit. So it's in my Bible, it's titled Josiah Renews the Covenant. And so it's kind of a plot spoiler, but that's basically what he does, and it's good news. And we get basically this beginning section in the bit that we read today is all about Josiah calling together the elders of Jerusalem and lots of the people and going up to the temple, which is, as we've heard, like this amazing building that's used to kind of worship God, but also kind of represents his, well, I guess his presence with his people. So the king goes up and he stands outside the temple. So he stands, it says in verse 3, the king stood by the pillar, and you're like, what is this pillar? Anyway, there are two pillars outside the temple, and they're made of bronze, so they're kind of like probably quite bright in sunlight. They're huge things, so they're like 8.5 meters tall, 3.5 meters wide. They really make a statement outside the temple. They're kind of like decorated, and on one of the pillars it says, "The Lord will establish your throne forever." And on the other pillar it says, "In the strength of the Lord the king will rejoice." And so we're not quite sure which one the king goes and stands under, or whether he just is in the middle, but it sounds like he's gone to one of the two pillars. And he's standing beneath these words, and he's establishing what is going to take place now. So he's renewing this covenant that he has with God, and he has with on behalf of the people. And so he says, it says in verse 3, the king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and keep his commands, statutes and decrees with all his heart and with all his soul. And I love that picture of someone standing again, even though they've probably made mistakes, they see things that are wrong in their life and the lives of the people that they kind of are responsible for. But in that moment, Josiah says, no, this is who I am. This is what we stand for as God's people. And I'm going to renew my covenant. I'm going to come back to God. And then he goes about clearing out in the most quite drastic and dramatic way the things that have gone wrong. He starts putting them right. But there's a lot of like tearing down, of like destroying, of destruction, of burning, of like completely eradicating any sign of the sin that the people have been involved in. So he kind of goes through the temple, and you kind of realise in this moment, they've been involved in so much, kind of stuff which is just so opposite to the way God's called them to live. It's like this basically this prostitutes in the temple. There's all this kind of like idol worship going on in the temple. He gets rid of all of that kind of stuff. He goes out and he finds places where people are sacrificing their sons and their daughters, and he's like, let's get rid of this place, like this is not right. Anyway, he goes through and through and through and clears out all these places and destroys all these things that are kind of like set up not to worship God. And then it kind of says in verse 25, I love this, it says that neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him, who turned to the Lord as he did, with all his heart and with all his soul and with all his strength, in accordance with the law of Moses. So there you go, there's a example for us to follow as people of God, that when we get it wrong and when things kind of take his place in our lives, when we end up focusing on other things, when we turn back to him, not to do it half-heartedly, but to turn back like Josiah did, with all our hearts, with all our souls and with all our strength.